Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Katie Weaver, and I'm a Deputy Program Director at the Council State Government Justice Center, and will also be your moderator for today's discussion. I want to thank our partners at the Center for Health and Justice at Treatment Alternatives for Safe Communities and at the Addiction Technology Transfer Center Network for co-sponsoring our webinar today. We received some feedback that there's a lot of background noise when I'm speaking, and we greatly apologize for this. We're trying to figure out what the technical difficulty is. I assure you that it's only me who is having the technical difficulties, so the background noise should disappear once the presenter begins speaking. But again, we apologize for the background noise in the issue today. I'll briefly cover a few housekeeping items about how the webinar is going to work. Anytime during this webinar, you can ask a question by typing it into the Q&A panel on the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. We will keep a running list of the content-related questions that we receive, and then we will ask our panelists to respond to the questions during the last segment of the webinar. We are recording this event, and we will post it on our website, and we should have the webinar posted online early next week. Once it has been posted, we will make sure to email you links to the recording and a link to the slides as well. This is a snapshot of the Reentry Resource Center page, and again, this is where you can go to receive the link, although we will make sure to send that to you directly as well. You can view our other webinars on here as well as sign up for announcements. I want to note that during this webinar, we are going to try something new. We're going to be including time for group discussion and exercises within your individual group. As you likely saw from the webinar invitation, we encourage people to attend this webinar in teams, using the computer together in one room. If you are not with a team, that's no problem. We still encourage you to participate in the exercises and discuss your thoughts with your team at a later date. There are 3 exercises during this webinar, and the links to these exercises, if you would like to print them out, are located in the chat box on the right-hand part of your screen. Again, you can feel free to print them out or view them on screen and use paper and pen to record your thoughts. After the webinar, there's going to be an opportunity for you to provide feedback, and strongly encourage you to fill this out and let us know what you think of this webinar format. Your feedback is very welcome as we try this out and determine if we'd like to do something similar moving forward. I would now like to introduce our featured speaker for this afternoon. Our presenter for today's webinar is Jack Charlier. He's the Director of Consulting and Training for the Center for Health and Justice at TASC. We are thrilled to have Jack with us here today. And with that, I'd like to now turn the webinar over to Jack, who's going to say a few words about TASC to begin his comments. Jack?
Thank you, Katie, and welcome everybody to today's webinar. Let me begin with telling you a little bit about where I work. So I am at the Center for Health and Justice at TASC. I'll tell you about TASC in just a minute. Some of you may be in jurisdictions where you're already familiar with that. Most of you are probably not. So the Center for Health and Justice is part of TASC, a division of TASC. It does public policy research, consulting, and training. And what kind of makes us unique is we are part of a much larger agency that does operational, ongoing work in the courts, prison, probation, parole, treatment, and community world each and every day. We have 275 staff spread throughout the state of Illinois. And so our work in research, our work in consulting and training is very much informed each and every day by the encounters we have with practitioners as we are throughout the justice system. Some of the types of work we do, you can see up on the screen. We do work on Affordable Care Act enrollment, sustainability for program, TCU tools. We are the TCU trainers for all the tools, if some of you use those, and other types of work that we do. So that's the Center for Health and Justice at TASC. And as I said, we are part of TASC, which some of you may know, which is Treatment Alternatives for Safe Communities. As you heard me say, it's operational statewide in Illinois, throughout the entities you see on the screen. TASC does case management. We actually don't deliver any services per se when you think of safe treatment or mental health. We're really focused on making sure that people get coming out of the justice system or in the justice system, get enrolled in treatment quickly, are retained in treatment, complete treatment, because we know that the research shows that when that happens, they will have an improved chance of recovery which also then leads, of course, to improved likelihood of being crime-free. And since we are part of the criminal justice system, even though we are working in treatment and community, we ensure accountability back to the system. If you want to find out more about TASC or the Center for Health and Justice, you can look through the website that you see on the screen. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Training objectives. So as a trainer, I always like to read this. This will be one of the few slides I'll read almost verbatim. So as a result of this presentation, you participants will be able to define system and systems approach, and that's going to be our starting point. State the 2 features of a system. State the 11 benefits of a systems approach. And don't worry, we won't go through the 11 benefits one by one. I'll just highlight the major ones. We'll have the rest of them available for you to view. Describe the 4 types of partnerships. Know how to define and use your current system. Understand how to grow your system. And then finally, at the end, I want to leave you with some action steps that you'll be able to take so that the information you receive in this webinar, you can go and do something with right away. Literally, as soon as you hang up the phone and disconnect from the internet, you can go in and start working on your system, building it, growing it, and using it. But prioritized by R&R, risk and responsibility, and then non-criminogenic use. So those are our training objectives. While those are important, the presentation, of course, also has a purpose to it. As adult learners, one of the things I want to do is make sure that you think about what's being presented here and say, does this work for me? Do I get it? Do I understand it for me and my team? And as Katie said up front, hopefully you're seated with the team. If not, that's okay. To reduce recidivism and restore lives, because that's really where we're driving from. This is not the introduction of a program or training. It's neither of those. It's a way of looking at the whole of all the pieces and parts that make up the organizations and entities that you interact with that also interact with you. And so the question is, if you think about it, then will you arrive at a point where you say that you would like to do this? So what I'd like to do is ask that you then, if you think about it and say, this is, if you start doing a systems approach, and again, this is where we'll leave you with some next steps where you can go ahead right away and do that. And then finally, that if you find that the systems approach works very well for you, that you become a leader in promoting this type of approach within your jurisdiction and within your community. Okay, let me get going here, and I'm noticing that there are some issues on sound. So just Sean, just so you know, I am holding the mic up all the way. So if there's something you need me to do, please just let me know. I see some notes coming in about sound, but I am holding the mic all the way up. Okay. So for today's webinar, we're trying something new, as Katie said. And what that means is that normally I do this presentation live, and in doing it live then I get to interact with you, you get to ask questions, I get to walk around the room and facilitate. I can't do that today. You can hear me. I can't hear you. You can't see me. I can't see you. And I can't walk around the room. So what we decided is this. There's going to be some parts of the presentation that have brief presentations to them. And then after that, your team will either do some discussions on your own, and at those times, we'll have a clock on the screen, or we'll give you a countdown of how much time you have left. And then there'll also be times where you have team exercises, And again, we'll give you an amount of time. I'll explain the exercise, and then put on the screen as well as verbally remind everybody how much time is left. So while I can't interact with you, we're hoping that this gives you an ability to work through some of the things we talk about today as a team. And then afterwards, if there are questions at the very end, you can send those in at that time. So a little different. I've never done a webinar like this before. I've never been on one like this. So I'm really hoping that this works out. And I know at the end we very much want your feedback on how this process works. But it's a little different than normal. So get ready to be involved in presentations that you see, and I hope you enjoy it and learn something from it and take away from it a desire to do a systems approach within your jurisdiction. Okay, with all that said, let's go ahead and get started right into the meat of it. So what is a systems approach? And in order to do that, we're going to start with understanding what is a system. I have just a few slides here before we get to our first discussion point, and essentially what is systems theory and why it's important for us to know. So a system, as you can see on the screen, is 2 or more parts that interact with each other to form a functional whole. Now, this webinar is geared for you as a line officer or line treatment staff, or a judge with a single docket, whatever it may be, where you're looking at really just your caseload, your clients, your offenders, whatever criminality you use, or for a small unit. And what I mean by small unit, that could be a single office. We're looking at this at the micro scale, not the macro scale. So just want to make sure that's clear when we talk about it, because there's other versions of this for states or entire counties. But we're really focused on you as an individual officer, an individual treatment provider, and your interaction with your partners at your line level and maybe supervisory or unit level. So when we talk about parts, those are public agencies, private agencies, of course by public we mean government, private agencies, which could be businesses, could be nonprofits, but we're really talking about organizations and not people. And when we get to the first exercise, I'll remind you of that, we really want you to think, well, who are the organizations and agencies that you work with? They're obviously populated by people, and that's probably the relationship that you have with them, but it may not fully define kind of who's in your system. So by parts, that's what I mean. And when it says interact, all I mean by that is not getting at how they interact, but is there something that moves from one of those agencies into the other and back out of that one and into another part of the system? That's all we mean. And there's different levels at which you can interact. And then finally, it forms a functional whole, right? It does something, and hopefully does something good and works well. And that's one of the interesting things about systems, is sometimes we have parts and pieces that are put together, but they don't really do a good job. And so the question is, should we keep it that way? Should we change it? But that's what we mean by parts, interaction, and functional whole. Systems also have a specific boundary. What does that mean? That means that we decide kind of what is the limit by which we're willing to say, this is where my system ends for the work that I do, and I draw the line here. Now, if you're on the treatment side, you could draw that line and say, well, it's treatment, and it's the client, and it's their family, and it's probation. You could draw the line there. That could work, but then again, you'd be leaving out other parts of the system. Likewise, if you're in probation, you can say, well, I'm just going to deal with the criminal justice organizations I deal with. And of course, that would be a way of defining the boundary, but it wouldn't be sufficient, because you know that there's other agencies or organizations outside of criminal justice that you interact with. That could be a faith-based community, that could be businesses where you have probationers who get work or get hired, or own businesses. And so the boundary idea is just that there's a kind of a limit to how far we want to go, and we want to recognize that. We also don't want to draw it too tight that we're excluding agencies and organizations that in fact we're interacting with. Systems have inputs and outputs. What that means is things go into the system, and again, we're thinking of all these organizations that make up your teams or your caseloads, organizations you interact with. Things go into them, and they come out of them. Now, one quick thing to understand about systems theory is we're not talking about people here. We're talking about cases. We're not talking about people, but cases. So what does that mean? Well, if you think of someone in the criminal justice system, and you said, well, Jack, me, I move into the system, and I get arrested, and I get processed, and I go to court, and then I go to treatment, then I go to probation, then I meet with my family, then I get a job. If you just followed me through that system, you would miss the fact that maybe in the commission of my crime, I had a victim. And then by only following me, you would leave the victim out of the system. But if you look at me as a case, there's me and the offense I did and who I am, and then there's the victim that was created when I committed my crime. Likewise, maybe because of who I am, there's a media case around me. And so the media has a sense of interest in the person or the case moving through the system. So we want to be careful not to think necessarily of inputs and outputs as people, but as cases to which a lot of things can be attached beyond the person, him or herself. Next, a system has no leaks, which means that we agree where things come into the system, to which organization and how it's going to route, and how it leaves the system. And so if you think of a police officer, and that police officer arrests someone, and a week later sees them back on the street, that person, that police officer may say, boy, I just arrested you a week ago. How did you get out so fast? And I know that's something my friends are working in for many, many times. And it's because we don't always agree on how you leak out of the system. And you see leaks in quotes, the idea being that people go in, inputs, cases go in, but they don't come out the way we all agree upon all the time. And sometimes cases stay in there for longer than people believe that should be the case. But the point is, systems generally, when they're functioning very well, agree on how cases go in criminal justice and how they come out. And then finally, inputs, so things that go in come out better. I don't mean to use this language and apply it certainly to people or even to cases, but in systems theory, the language is people or things come out defect-free. Now, that's not in reference to human beings. But certainly when we think about the criminal justice system, our one goal, and I've said this ever since I started as a criminal justice practitioner, was our one goal is to make sure that there is no new crime, period. There's nothing else going on than that. And how we do that and the methods we do it and how we view our mission, that of course varies. But the idea is that people come out and, in fact, do not commit new crime. So very clear, very simply, that is what is a system. There's not much more to it than that. So let's move on to just two more items. Then we'll get to our first time of discussion for you and your team. So what are the features of a system? Very simply, it's the additive quality and the reductive quality. The additive quality is at the top of your screen. And when we put all these pieces together, when we put these pieces, these organizations, these agencies that we work with, the system does something that can't be seen in any individual part. In other words, the sum of the parts, right? You put them all together, and the sum is greater than anything you see going on in any of the single ones. And then finally, single agencies, organizations. Finally, when we take the system apart, this is the reductive quality, it is reduced or doesn't function at all. And this is kind of the more intuitive one for us to understand, that if you think about the agencies and organizations you interact with, pull out of there, for example, your probation department. Just pull your probation department out. And you say, well, does it have reduced functionality if we pull it out? And if the answer is yes, and it should be yes across the board, then we know that that probation department was part of the system. If somehow or another you arrived at the answer that no, our system functions fine without the probation department, then you'd say, well, the probation department is not part of the system. So this is the features of a system help us understand, is something actually part of the system or not? By adding it in, do we see something happen that didn't happen otherwise? And by removing it, do we get reduced or no functionality? And so by answering that question, we can understand very generically, is something part of a system? Okay, so let's get going here to our first exercise, our first discussion, I should say, thinking about systems. And again, this is where not being able to see and interact with you, I want to make sure I explain this clearly. So let me just go over this, and then we'll give you a couple minutes to talk about it with your team. So when we talk about systems, the two examples we use are rocks and elephant. Rocks and elephant. So I'd like you to think through for just 2 minutes. Rocks, that pile of rocks you see on the screen, that picture of rocks, are rocks, that pile of rocks, are they a system? And likewise, an elephant, you see the picture on the elephant there, is an elephant a system? So if you can just go ahead and take 2 minutes and discuss that amongst your team. Are rocks a system? And is an elephant a system? So go ahead for 2 minutes, please. Okay, 1 more minute. 1 more minute for your brief discussion on rocks, the rocks and the elephant. Are rocks a system? And is an elephant a system? 1 more minute. Please finish up your discussions. Well, let's go ahead. You'll get another chance to discuss systems on the next slide. So let me kind of frame this out or how this works. So when we think about systems, right, the things we went over, two or more parts, interact with each other, form a functional whole, has a boundary, things go in and out of it, no leaks, and things come out better than they went in. So when we think about rocks, the answer would be, and this is really fun when I get to do it live, obviously in person with people, because you hear all sorts of reasoning about it, which is good. It's good thinking. The answer, though, is a pile of rocks is not a system. It doesn't really meet kind of any of the criteria. And it's meant to show on one end, right, you think the rocks on one end of the spectrum of understanding systems, the elephant is clearly at the other end, but that sometimes the things that we consider systems are really like a pile of rocks, right? It's different programs and agencies and organizations and vendors and relationships or lack thereof that over the years have been piled together and are asked to function together. But really they don't, or they don't do it very well, and they don't talk to each other very much, and they have mistrust, they have confusion, and we add in a new thing because a new initiative comes down the line, and we bring on a new partner, but we don't really integrate them in what we do. And so the rocks are there to show, here's one end of the spectrum of what systems can look like, and it's a pile of rocks. And again, sometimes we are in systems. You may find yourself when you think about your caseload or your unit and the agencies and organizations that you partner with, and I'm going to use that word partner very loosely, and realize, boy, what I really got here is a pile of rocks and not really a system. At the other end is an elephant. And an elephant, as a living organism, we recognize, of course, is a system. It certainly has two or more parts, right? It has a trunk, it has a tail, it has legs, it has a body, it has ears. They all interact with each other, and certainly they form a functional whole. It has a boundary, and of course that's defined, by its body. That's clear. And this is kind of a goofy example. It's the one we use, but I get that it's meant to be a little goofy, and that's okay. It has inputs. It definitely has inputs. And if you've ever been to a zoo or seen a wild elephant or any of our existence, of course we know it has outputs. It has no leaks, or at least the elephant certainly hopes it has no leaks. That would be a bad thing for any of us. And as far as inputs coming out better, of course, and again, this is meant to be kind of two humorous ends of the system scale, if you will. The way to think about this is that the inputs that the elephant eats are properly used and fully digested and give it all the nutrients it needs so that everything comes out better. And we'll just leave it at that. It's definitely a system, clearly a system. So when we think about our systems now, maybe we'd all like to have systems that look like elephants, but while a pile of rocks may define for some of us kind of where we are, and of course none of us are really at that point, we're really not at the other point either. Certainly I've never seen one that is so integrated, so holistic, like a living organism, like an elephant. So we want to avoid being a pile of rocks, but also make sure that we're not thinking that we're ever going to be able to achieve a living organism, an elephant, as a system. Okay, so that was your first chance to talk as a team amongst your group there, if you're not from the team, from the same office or unit. And if you're by yourself, just kind of think this through in your mind. And let's move on to our second one. I'll give you another 2 minutes to discuss this. Give you a minute warning when first minute is up. Is criminal justice a system? Is criminal justice a system? And let me just back up here to this slide. So take a look at this slide again. Two or more parts interact with each other to form a whole. There's a boundary, inputs, outputs. It has no leaks. Leaks being ways that we don't want things to come in and out of the system. And then things that go in come out better. So that's what is a system. So 2 minutes, please, think through, is criminal justice a system? And I'm going to go ahead and get started, please. Okay, one more minute. Is criminal justice a system? And talk about that amongst yourself with your team or the people you're watching the webinar with. And if you're by yourself, just kind of think it through based on the definition of a system. Okay, so is criminal justice a system? Well, the answer is yes and no. If you were a pure systems theory person, you'd say no. The reason is that, and there's many reasons, but one of which is that the things that go into the system do not always come out better, and the things in this case are cases, right? And most people with cases do not always come out better, resolved, defect-free, if you will. And again, I don't like using that word that applies to people, but I just going to use it within the context of systems theory. But if you're a practitioner or professional within criminal justice in the community, you'd say, of course it's a system. These different pieces interact together. There's a boundary. We kind of define the limits of what is a system. We don't consider the grocery store chain to be an organization and a system. Then again, you could say it is, especially if it's saying at a commitment to hiring people who are under criminal justice supervision. You'd say it is. But you get the idea that there is a boundary to it. Things go in and out of it. Hopefully things come out at least attempted to have been better. People come out better. Victims' situations come out resolved. The media angle on things comes out to a satisfactory answer. Whatever it may be, most people say, yeah, it's a system. Now, what's interesting to know about this map is while this is the criminal justice system, you notice, of course, that what's missing is things like treatment and community. And so this, if you defined your system just by the criminal justice entities, you probably would be lacking because you would be leaving off all the outside organizations and agencies, whether they're contracted or not, that are actually interacting with you that are now part of the system. And my guess is every team, you grasp that. You grasp that this is a missing element of the system. And sometimes we use the word criminal justice system with a phrase, and we really mean treatment and faith and business, so we just say criminal justice. So hopefully your 2-minute discussion on this was good, and I'm sure you all arrived at that distinction. Okay, let's get going here on to our first exercise in just a few slides. So then, now that we've defined a system, what is a systems approach? So, approach that looks at solutions, right? We're all about solutions. That's the point of this. This is not training. It's not a program. It's not doing something new for the sake of doing something new. It's we want solutions to the problems that we have. And it begins with the whole, right? It begins with the whole. What are the agencies and organizations that I interact with? And then it looks at all the parts, and you just saw that through what we did. It says, well, how do they relate to one another? How do they fit together? And we're going to talk about that in the upcoming exercises you're going to do with the team. What are some of the solutions? The number one that I've said from day one that we all know is to stop future crime. That's the whole point of criminal justice. I shouldn't say the whole point, but it's the main thing, is that we want to make sure there is no new crime, no new victims. And you can read the rest that are on there, obviously reduce recidivism, restore lives, and so on. The idea is we're looking for solutions. We're not just looking to do something, but to achieve something. And a systems approach takes us a big step towards that end. Very quickly then, reasons to use a systems approach. And there's 3 slides here. Like I said, I will not go over each point. You can read these, and I know the slides will be available later. The main one here is we're going to get to greater engagement. As we said about TASC and the work we do, but this is true anywhere, is it's referral, retention, and completion of service. And we think about criminogenic risk needs, and on the needs side, right, the ability for a person to get into a service, whatever that is on the criminogenic side, fast, to be retained in that service. Retained means maybe they drop in, they drop out, they show up, they don't show up, to be retained and complete. Completion of an evidence-based practice and fidelity to that practice is the desire and the design for systems, right? Systems want things to come out what? Defect-free. So in order to have something come out defect-free, and again, I know I'm using that language for a case, and I don't mean to make light of it because it involves human, but for things to come out defect-free, for cases to come out defect-free, the system must all be cranking towards the idea that together we need to make sure people who are referred for criminogenic needs, and it could be for other things too, are referred timely, are retained, and complete. Improved accountability, of course, this is the justice system, and we want to make sure that that's there. The next one is consistency of message between supervision, treatment, and partners. I have to tell you, one of the most frustrating things I ever encountered in my days in parole was when those three entities that you see on there weren't all saying the same thing. So if I said, so parolee, it's important for you to do treatment, and I'm not picking on treatment providers here, but the treatment provider was overwhelmed and said, let me just do this quick assessment. Okay, you don't need treatment. Take this letter back to the parole officer and tell them you don't need treatment. And the partners weren't reinforcing the message of the importance of treatment. And I'm certainly not removing myself from that circle. The idea is, of course, then that the offender and the client or the person gets mixed messages, and the system doesn't work if it can't produce this defect-free, can't make that person come out of the system better than they went in. Uniform understanding of sanctions and rewards, you get the idea there. That's just a follow-up of the one before it. That we're all in agreement on how this works, the sanctions and rewards, all the research on rewards and rewards. So I'll just quickly show these to you. I think the only one I'm going to talk about on here is open up communication and really what's going to happen in the system, especially as you get to different levels of partnership, is your knowledge of other organizations and their knowledge of you, how you work, your processes, what's important to you, what's not important to you, what you're willing to risk and what you're not willing to risk. The more you know that about each other, the more likely that you come to agreement on what that means for each organization, the more likely it is you're going to start moving towards or will arrive at something that looks more like a system. And then finally, you've got these few on here. As I said, I'm not reading through every one. I will, though, point you to the bottom one, democracy, people engaged in solutions. Again, the systems approach is about solutions. That's the whole point of this, is we want solutions to people who are involved in criminal justice and cases that are moving through the system. And really, there is this sense that we have in America that when we engage people in being part of the solving of problems, that we have a belief, and there's some research to support this, it really kind of depends on how it's done, but we have a belief that the very people who are involved in it, affected by it, or just have an interest in making their community better, that they bring knowledge and skills and experiences to the table that when they're left out, don't really allow us to get kind of a full bang for buck proposition and arrive at durable, sustainable solutions. It's a little bit more involved the way I said it, but that's really what's going on in that last bullet point there. Okay, so let's go on here now to understanding your current system, and we're going to be one slide away here from your first team exercise. So to get you prepped, let me ask you the following. So in your team, and don't just kind of stay quiet for now, because I'm going to read through this and we'll do the exercise. Ask yourself, who is part of your system, right? You see the empty chairs there, so you're going to fill in those chairs in just 1 minute. Who is part of your system? How do your offenders, clients, or whatever terminology you use for the people that you work with interact with the system? And what does the data tell you? So each one of these questions is a way of getting at defining the definition of your system. And we're going to do an exercise on each one. The first one we're going to do is a community mapping exercise. Many of you or some of you have probably done this, whether it's through work or elsewhere. This is just a kind of a cool color example of what it looks like. And let me see here. Yeah, I think that, let me move on to the next one. This is the one then where you're going to do the exercise. So the color one here is the same as the exercise you're going to do with system color. And then this is what your first printout should look like. So this is one of the items that you should have printed out ahead of time so that you're able to do this exercise. I'd like you now to take 15 minutes and gather together in a team or with the group that you're with. And if you're alone, please just go ahead and do this exercise alone. I'm going to ask you just fill in the name of the agencies, not the people, but the agencies and organizations that fit in each box. But don't go outside the boxes for now. In other words, if you realize there's a box that should be on here but isn't, don't do that right now. Just go through each one, start wherever you want, or jump around and say, Treatment, and the bottom right here are the 3 treatment organizations I work with, and write their name in. Jack's Treatment, Bob's Treatment, and Letitia's Treatment. And you write those 3 and just leave it at that. So again, 15 minutes, do it as a team, or with the group you're sitting with, and if you're alone, just go through the exercise, and this should be one that you, sheet that you were printing out and have available to you. So we'll go ahead and start right now. You've got 15 minutes, give or take.
Okay, everybody, please just let me know that there are 10 minutes left for the exercise. Just to let you all know that there are about 5 minutes left for the exercise. Thank you. There's about 1 minute left for the exercise, so Jack, feel free to go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Katie. I appreciate that. Yeah, let's just go ahead and wrap up. The idea, of course, is we just get a chance to begin to do this, not that we're able to complete it. So 15 seconds, and let's just wrap up, and we'll move on to our next team exercise, which is directly related to this. So 15 seconds, just go ahead and finish up, please. Okay, so the other way to understand your system, or what I mean by the other way is to try to get a complete picture, you wouldn't use any of these in isolation, is to think through then the questions that you see on your screen. And for this, you did not have a printout. You can just write it on the community map you are using for the first team exercise. So for team exercise number 2, I'll give you 5 minutes, a little bit less than that. And what you're going to do here is ask these questions up top, and then you see at the blank at the bottom and say, well, which of these organizations up top that I've already filled in do I not have on my map, and in which case just draw a box and then put the name of those agencies, organizations that go in that box. And at the bottom, ask yourself some open-ended questions. Who else is missing from my systems map, my community map? So this is really going beyond the boxes that are already on the community map and just filling it in with those that you know but aren't on there. So go ahead and we'll take actually a little bit less than 5 minutes just so we can keep going. A little less than 5 minutes. And again, you're going to do this right on the community map that you use for team exercise number 1. So go ahead and start.
We have about 1 minute left for this exercise.
Okay, go ahead and take just a few seconds here and finish up. The idea, of course, is that after the webinar, you can get together with your team, and you may have more people that, as you realize what a system is and what a systems approach looks like, that you want to incorporate into these exercises so that you can fully define your system. It really is one of the first steps that has to happen. Think through all the agencies and organizations that are in it before you actually get going on a systems approach. So let's go ahead and move on then to team exercise number 3. And I just want to say I very much appreciate your patience with this, as Katie and I both said, which is something new that we're doing with a webinar with a very large audience. And since we can't interact with each other, I just appreciate you kind of taking the exercise, doing it, and I hope that my explanations are sufficient, and if not, my apologies for that. Okay, team exercise number 3, what does the data tell us? So this is another way of kind of fleshing out, identifying, and understanding the system. It says 10 minutes. We're going to switch that to 5 minutes. We want to make sure we have ample time at the end for questions, because quite a few are coming in. So team exercise number 3, what does the data tell us? And the way to think about this is if you look at your community map or your systems map, that's really what you're developing, and you were to take one of the boxes on there, and so for the examples you see on the screen, the example is treatment, and maybe you have 1, 2, or 3, or 4 treatment organizations in there. Take a look and ask yourself these questions. And it could be, by the way, any box. You would do this with any box that's on the map. We're just using treatment as an example. That's the blue box you see on your screen. Which provider do you refer to most? And you can think through, and if you don't know the data, then this is one of the things we want to do is think through and say, well, I have a caseload of 80, and I'm doing this as an individual, and I put 20 to Jack's treatment, and 10 go to Bob's treatment, and 10 go to Letitia's treatment. For a total of 40 slots that I have available to me for treatment. What services are available at this provider? And again, we're using a treatment example, but it could be job training, non-criminogenic, could be an employer, could be faith-based, could be school, could be a variety of things. So what do I get out of this provider? What does the person get out of this provider? How many cases? Again, that's the data flow. And then when we talk about referral and retention and completion, we're going to look at that. How many people go to initial appointment, how many people complete the treatment. And on the left-hand side where it says which partners, again, these are more questions to ask for each partner in whichever box you choose for this exercise. Why do I use them? How often do I use them? What dosage? Dosages, are they there for 5 weeks? Is this a 10-week job training program or a 20-week school program, whatever it may be? And that's all relevant because you don't want to misuse resources in the system. Send someone a 20-week program when you're only going to have them for 10 weeks, and then they drop out at week 11. That's a waste for the system to use that resource. So go ahead and just take 5 minutes. Take one box off your systems map. It doesn't matter which one you use as long as there's an agency organization in there. And ask yourself as a team, or if you're alone, just obviously then ask yourself. But as a team, ask yourself, okay, so of these organizations, how do we answer these questions? And if you work through one of the agencies, then go to another one or pick another box and do an agency or organization in that box. So we're going to go with just 5 minutes on this. And again, this is the type of thing where you can do this on your own when the webinar is done. And so let's go ahead and start with 5 minutes for team exercise number 3.
There's about 1 minute left for this exercise.
All right, if I can ask you to just go ahead and finish up on this exercise. This one, the third exercise, DSA number 3, is the hardest one to do. You may not have had the information in front of you to make it happen. I very much urge you after this webinar, one of the next steps, to go back and think through for your system. Again, this is a line-level officer, prison provider, prison staff member approach, or small unit or single probation office unit, so it's very doable. This one actually, while the hardest to do, also reveals the most information. One of those systems are inputs and outputs. Things move through it, and where they move and how they move. And we don't kind of get into all those details on this version of the webinar, but mapping that out and knowing the case flow in and out, including you, if you're the probation or treatment provider, is very, very critical to know whether or not your system has leaked, and of where the points that are not connected as well as they should be, in fact, are, where things should be connected but aren't connected. Are you overusing or underusing a certain part of the system? And that's really what this one's getting at. So I just want to encourage you to kind of go in depth on your own then once this webinar ends. Okay, let's get going here into the final 15 minutes of the webinar. Partnerships. Now, we use the word partnership very loosely in language normally, and that makes sense, no problem with that. When we talk about it from a systems approach, it has some very specific meanings. So very quickly, partnership, of course, can mean many things. What we're really looking at is 4 specific things that define a partnership. Alignment of mission. We all know what mission is. We get mission alignment. Is what I'm doing matching what you're doing in terms of our organizational mission. Sharing of resources. That's money. That's people. That's copy machines. That's cars. That's buildings. Whatever it may be. Risk sharing. If this whole thing heads south, who's going to be the one standing in front of the media and taking the heat? And will my system partners be there, or will they desert me? And return. What am I getting out of this for this involvement in a system? So when you think of partnerships, you're going to think about them from the standpoint of how aligned are the missions of the organization? Are we sharing resources? Are we sharing risk? And are we all getting the return that seems to fit for our organization? So higher up the ladder you go, obviously the stronger partnership, and you may be familiar with this phrase. The idea is that the more risk we share, the more resources we share, the more return we share, and the more likely our mission is aligned. It's called skin in the game. And if everybody's got equal skin in the game, you've got probably a good partnership. You've got 1 or 2 organizations holding all the skin in the game, and 3 or 4 that are holding a little bit, and some holding almost none. You don't really have a system per se, and you definitely don't have partnerships. 4 levels of partnership. Here's the terminology for it, and then we're going to do a quick exercise on it. Coexistence, communication, cooperation, collaboration. Just know that it goes from a weak partnership or almost non-existent up to collaboration where we're sharing outcomes, right? We're agreeing to the direction that we're going to go. And for a systems approach, collaboration is the best. That's where we all have fairly equal amounts of skin in the game. And when things head south, we'll all be standing by each other. And when it's time to celebrate, we'll all be celebrating with each other. And we're all seeing kind of what's coming out of it and how this fits for our organization. So a very quick exercise on partnerships. This is team exercise number 4. This is one that you would have printed out ahead of time. So go ahead and take 5 minutes. And just take some of the organizations that are on this community map. It doesn't matter where you start, which ones you start with. You're not going to be able to get through them all. And just write the name of that agency or organization in the circle in which you think it belongs. You have on the screen in the upper left-hand side, again, the idea of coexistence all the way up to collaboration. And just write your partners, those collaborate, communicate, cooperate, coexist, where they belong on the circle from your systems map. So we'll take just a few minutes, probably a little less than 5, if that's okay, Katie. A little less than 5 just to get this started. So go ahead and begin this with your team or on your own.
about 1 minute left for this exercise.
Okay, and as you finish up this exercise, really what you're looking at here, if we were to kind of do this a full-blown version of it, is what is the relationship between the different parts of the system? Are some agencies or organizations kind of getting used and others are not? And how fair and equitable is it? And what do the system partnerships, what does that mean then for the system partnerships? So go ahead again, this is one where you're going to want to continue this after the webinar on your own. So thanks for doing this. We have just one more exercise to go, and then we'll get a chance for Q&A for some of the questions that have come in. There's quite a few. So we'll go ahead and get going. And again, you can finish this afterwards with your team back at your office in your unit as you see fit. All right, so using your system, and I'm just going to go through these next 4 or 5 slides fairly quickly because you'll have access to the slides and you can read them on your own. Really what you're looking at is you want to repeat these actions that you see on your screen. So once you understand, okay, this is my system, I've mapped it out, I've met all these people, is you want to do these things over and over that you see here on the screen. I think that the only two that I'm going to comment on is the first one, focus on two-way relationships, especially for people in government. It may be, and I've worked in government for many years, it may be that you look at some partners, you sometimes look at some partners, I want to be very careful when I say that, as people that are contracted with us or are vendors, or they just have to do this because that's a relationship we have. And I would tell you that all relationships, good relationships actually, are at least two-way. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then on the bottom one, advocate, which is the power of a system is the ability for a variety of agencies and organizations to speak with one single voice. It's not easy to achieve. It may not be something that every system wants to do, but when you think about your caseload, your unit, and your interaction with the community, my guess is there's 2 to 3 things that all of you can come to some agreement on, that if there's a louder voice speaking out on behalf of it or advocating for something, and hear nothing in that word advocate, it just means to speak up on behalf of others about, that you could find it, and that could bring a powerful message into kind of the public debate around an issue, whatever that could be, or for resources. So you can read all these, but again, the first, the top one, and the bottom one are the ones I wanted to say something about. And finally, when we talk about using your system, take people out to lunch. I learned over many, many years that buying a lunch for system partners and doing it regularly is really just a great way to use a system and to build a system. And so you have the ability over a meal to share, to relax, talk about things other than business, and we all know what that means. That means that you begin to build a relationship that goes professional, but beyond just work conversation. And that's when you really get at the heart of what's going on between agencies and organizations. Growing your system, right? So we talk about using it, and then we talk about growing it. And so this looks a lot like using your system. Here are some questions that you'd want to ask yourself, and we're going to head to the final exercise here. So who needs to be part of the system? We did the system map. Who did you think was missing? And what I mean by missing is could be on there, but now is not currently on there. I don't mean ones that you know about that just weren't on a box, but who should be on there? How do offenders, clients interact with the system? So what are they doing that you may not be aware of? And then the data, that data exercise we went through, albeit too quickly, what does the data say? Take a look at it in 6 months, take a look at it in a year, and see how the flow of cases in and out of the system has changed based on new agencies and organizations coming in and out, based on budget cuts, change in leadership, whatever it may be, and keep track of that. Again, repeat these types of actions you can see on here, and we'll have access to the slides. I won't go through all of them. Really, this thing about building new relationships is a continual process. It's very easy for us to kind of get bogged down in the things that we are doing each and every day to just get our job done and get the volume of work done, and I get that. Been there, done that, as they say. But the reality is, from a systems perspective, you got to, every single week, do at least one new agency or organization if you go out and meet, or take somebody out to lunch, or go meet up with someone and just do that so that the relationship can be built. It's a simple thing to do. It is not easy to do. I'm not going to tell you that, but it pays huge dividends all around. And then the middle one here where it says invite them to your house, visit their house. I have house in quotes, obviously I mean their agency organization. Have them in for staff meetings. Let them meet your staff. And you go to their house and you meet their staff. If you can't do it in person, do it by phone. Maybe use Google Hangout or Skype. The point is, again, the development of the relationship, the understanding of who these agencies and organizations are in terms of the system relationship. And the rest of those you can see on the slide when you download those. And again, take them out to lunch. Best way to build up a system and build up relationships is to take people out to eat. I promise you it works, pays huge dividends, and who doesn't like a meal? You know, especially one when you're paying for it. And the neat thing is, and I say this humorously, is as you build a system, and I did this for many, many years, I used to get in trouble all the time when I got home and I look at my credit card and my cash and say, my gosh, how many lunches did you buy? Eventually you start getting some lunches back. So I say it humorously, it's not the reason you do it, but it's nice when you sit down and the partner say, you know what, we got this one, Bill. This is on us. And it's not the lunch, it's the level of relationship that's developed as a result of that is just outstanding for all the things that we talked about as to why we take this approach. Okay, final exercise, and we'll have time for questions. Team exercise 5, and this again is one of the items that you print it out ahead of time. These are to give you some next steps. So just 1, 2, or 3 things, that's all I'm going to ask, and you're going to have this to take away for your team to think about, for the group you're sitting with, or if you're alone, to kind of think through this. To build your system, who should be part of it, who currently is not. You want to look at your efforts based on risk and responsivity, which means whoever retired probation officer in their neighborhood, who if you went to them and said, you know what, we need some more student class, I know you know C4C, would you like to come in and volunteer if we give you the space and the ability to do it? That's a way to think about this. But so think through these 3 bullet points and just come up with 1, 2, or 3 items in the next few minutes. We won't take 10 minutes, that slides off, and do this exercise. You're left with a very practical step of what to do. So let's go and get started, and we'll give you just under 5 minutes, and then we'll finish up with questions. So go ahead and get started on exercise number 5, coming up with 1, 2 to 3 next steps that help you build system capacity.
So let everyone know that you have about a minute left.
Okay, if you can go ahead and finish up this exercise. And again, normally I do this in person. It's done over many hours. So I very much appreciate your willingness to do this on the webinar as participants, as teams. I'm hoping it has enough of an effect for you to be able to walk away and use this. The idea of here is to kind of bring it all together and say, okay, we've mapped out our system. We understand who the players are, agency's organization. We understand our relationship to one another and how that can be improved and where it's going well. And now we want to just put in some next steps. And this idea of prioritizing it first on criminogenic needs is really taking a look and saying, you know, beyond the people that we pay or that get paid to do this, who's out there and who are they? And it could be that you find, in fact, it often is when we do this, that people find some amount of services, resources out there. And you got to give back too, right? Skin in the game. Everybody's got to give on a two-way relationship. So enough said about that. Let me now thank you for doing that team exercise. And Katie, I'm turning it back over to you for questions and answers. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Jack. Really appreciate it. As Jack mentioned, we have a little bit of time left for some questions. And as a reminder, you can go ahead and ask the question by typing it into the Q&A panel at the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. We'll go ahead and get started with some of those. So Jack, we have this one question that came in towards the beginning during one of the exercises. Do you feel that in order to have a functional system that you need to have parts with a unified vision or consistent end goal?
So the answer is yes and no. Yes in the sense that when we talk about partnerships, if you want a collaboration or collaborative partnerships, that is about shared outcomes. That we all agree the outcomes that we all want to work towards. The police department, the churches, the synagogues, the mosques, the treatment agency, the probation department, the businesses in the community, we all agree on one or two outcomes. And in that sense, that functions best. And that's called collaboration, and that would define, or that would be a system. In the real world, again, where we see the elephant, we really can't see an elephant, but in kind of, I should say, the real world, but in practical application, you're probably not going to get to that as you move that boundary of the system farther out. So it could be that if you just said within a real kind of smaller boundary of a court, its probation department, a couple treatment providers, some vendors, and some really engaged partners, yes, you could get towards a shared vision, shared outcomes, and everything just kind of humming along. Drug courts, for example, really kind of come close to this very collaborative type of approach. But as you move that boundary farther and farther out and you consider where cases move all over the community, it becomes harder to do. So yes, it's possible, and it really depends on where you move that boundary and what is the nature of the relationship. The good news is, very quickly, if the relationships aren't where they need to be, you want to try to build that kind of system, that you do have the ability to work on those relationships and partner with others.
Great, thank you. Another question that we've received is, what would you recommend in regards to finding new partners to add to the current system?
So say that again, where do I recommend?
What would you recommend in regards to finding new partners to add to the current system? So I would interpret this as, you know, sort of how you would need to assess who you're working with and who you might need to bring to the table.
Sure. So there's two real quick ways to do that, or two understandings. One is when we did the data analysis, if you find out from that there's certain types of services or needs that the system has that are not there, and those are probably going to be more along the professional line. You can do an environmental scan of the community. You can ask the other parts of the system, where do you know that I can get more of this, whatever this is? And that's really kind of a very straightforward approach. So if you wanted more jobs for people on probation, the Chamber of Commerce, for example, would be a real natural fit for that, because maybe you have 3 businesses or 5 businesses that you want to hire them, and that's it. I'd go to the Chamber of Commerce and introduce yourself and say, well, here's what we're looking for. You know, what do you have, and what can we give you in return? The other way to do it, especially with social media nowadays, and I didn't go into this in the presentation, the social media allows you to find an audience of tremendous size for you to tap into and to give back to, right? It's a skin in the game type of conversation. So can you use social media, Twitter, Facebook, web pages, kind of think about flying a neighborhood, asking for resources. Can you use social media to do that? And that can be a very powerful tool when used correctly to reach well beyond your community. And that's really kind of a shotgun approach because you're just going to put it out there. It's got strategy behind it, but you're just going to put it out there. Whereas the first one's a very targeted approach, going after or looking to meet with agencies and organizations that are somewhere in the arena that you're already working. So those are the two kind of main ways that I think about it.
Great, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. This can be much as sort of similar, but more discussing how you can better approach people once you have identified them. So the question is, previously it has been very difficult to get different parts of the community map to work together collectively and to get everyone to the table. Is there a way to approach a better interaction and cooperation once you've identified the folks you need at the table?
Definitely different strategies to use, understanding the culture of the community so that who makes that initial approach is very important. So if you're a government entity, if you're in a community where government kind of maybe looked upon, not maybe as part of the solution or not kind of as a bigger part of the solution as in other communities, you'd want to find then a potential partner who can kind of do that initial listing. Maybe it's someone from a faith-based arena, maybe it's someone from the business community, who then is the convener, right? Is the convener versus the government entity. And I'm not saying that everybody on this call is always the government entity, but maybe there's another agency, organization that does agree to it and can be the convener. That's one way to look at it. Another way is to kind of organize around the issue. Things happen in communities that cause disruption, that cause harm, or cause people to get outrage. Those can be tremendous opportunities, unfortunately, for whatever the event is, but also good opportunities by which to reach out and say, hey, let's get together and do something about this, whatever this is. I know our time is short. There's a lot of strategies. Those are just two that come to mind. Actually, I'll throw out a third one and see we got a few seconds here. A third one then is to realize that not everybody is going to be part of a system and wants to be part of it, and sometimes you just start small and go and go and go and be persistent and take lots of people out to lunch over an extended period of time, and that's a reality the system approaches. And I would tell you very generically, in time you're probably going to find that some of those partners come on as you discussed over a meal what's happened in the past, why they're not interested, what has gone on that has dissuaded them from being involved with you. And, a good meal goes a long way. I know it sounds simple and funny, but I bet a lot of money on a lot of good meals involving a lot of situations.
Great, thank you, Jack. So we are actually out of time for today. We want to thank all of you for participating in the webinar. If you'd like to touch base regarding any of the content that was presented, and if you have any additional questions, you can feel free to reach out to me, and in turn we'll go ahead and contact Jack as well. This actually concludes today's webinar. After you exit the webinar, a brief survey will appear on the screen. And again, we greatly appreciate it if you take a few minutes to complete the survey and provide some comments on the content as well as your thoughts on the structure and format of today's webinar. We will email a link to the recording of the presentation as well as a link to a PDF of the slides early next week. And these links will also be made available on the National Reentry Resource Center website, and the link to that website is on the screen below the phone number. I also encourage you to sign up for our newsletter as well. You can hear about these types of webinars and other events as well, and that is the second link that you see on the screen in front of you. Thank you again to Jack, the TASC, and the Addiction Technologies Resource Center Network, as well as DJA for your partnership on today's webinar. And thank you all again for joining us. We appreciate your participation, and we look forward to having you on another webinar soon. Thanks again, and take care.